the city and look for ways to change it.
Which is why we thought that Christian's talk really needed to be in that section, because he's talking about a kind of love of the city from a different perspective. Our first speaker will be from Loveland. Her name is Uni Jang, and she works at Interweave Press. And she's just talking about what it's like to be a creative. And it's called Makers and Believers, right, is the theme of her talk. And she's just talking about that. Our next speaker is Peter?
Amy.
Amy Prieto.
Who I have heard, and she is amazing.
Yeah, I've not met her yet. But Amy is talking about what it's like to start something in northern Colorado, right? Because she's she's the person who does the battery design for Lightning hybrids.
Oh.
And so she's just talking about, well, here's what it's like to be a maker or creator, imagining something new in Colorado.
She's the CSU professor, though, right?
Yes.
Her story is amazing because she came and was very bold about creating batteries, and she would give her students nothing, and she knew they couldn't come up with a solution, and then they did.
Yeah.
So she's amazing.
And then comes Peter, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So then Peter will
Not
speak.
you.
No, Peter Kageyama. Peter will speak, and then Christian is next, right after Peter? Okay,
right after Peter.
So you get to go after the big headliner, Christian. No pressure.
And say,
before me.
let me tell you about potential.
Right. And we're going to make sure that you have a chance to talk with Peter as your talks start to evolve. So you can know what he's going to be talking about, and you can echo some of his themes, and he can know what you're going to be talking about, and he can presage, if I can use that word, but lay out in advance some of the themes that you'll be working on. So there's a real nice connection between the two.
Nice.
And then after Christian, then we go to Joan King, who's talking about where creativity resides. And she's a cellular biologist. And it's a short talk, but her whole talk is about how we need to get past the notion that there are creatives and non-creatives, that there's creativity in every single cell of the human body, and so, because every cell creates, right? Every individual cell in our body creates something that makes us who we are. So every cell in a community, every cell at a school, everybody is creative. And then Don Prophet, who's a really good friend of mine, will close out that session talking about the importance of failure. Right, and how important, he's an artist, and he's a former high school principal, art teacher.
Nice.
John Stewart was actually one of the students in his school when he was principal. And he'll talk about how important it is to fail at what you're doing so that you can learn from that, which is a nice sort of way to wrap up the question about potential. Okay. Same as I said with Christian will be true for you, Peter. Our first speaker in the challenge section is a woman who I think is in her mid-20s. I haven't asked her age, who was shot when she was 9 by a .22 rifle. And she hasn't shared the details yet. She'll share that in her talk, and is paralyzed. And she's talking about the challenges we choose to accept and the challenges we don't have to accept. All right? Sort of thinking about, just because something happened to me like this, there are certain challenges that I can choose to accept out of that, and others I can ignore and go forward with. So she'll be our opening speaker, and then who comes after her?
Can you say her name? Is it Changa? Changa Hinton? That's
Chanda Hinton Likely is the young woman's name.
Okay, it says Changa.
Oh, well, we need to get that changed.
Okay.
It's a D.
And then Nicholas Carell.
Nicholas Carell is a professor at Colorado, or University of Colorado, and Nick is going to be talking about the challenge of how we use the land. Right? He is a specialist in polycultural agriculture. So instead of taking like one 40-acre field and planting it all in corn or soybeans, he's trying to think about ways that we can take that same field and plant it in a variety of crops that all nurture and support each other, serving as pesticides for each other, providing fertilizer for each other, etc., and how we can rebuild local agriculture in a way that's probably going to connect to some of your naturopathic thinking in terms of the kinds of food we eat and all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
And he's going to make an argument that we kind of have to do that because we can't farm single crops with gasoline anymore like we did in the 20th century. Right? That game is kind of over. And after Nicholas is that?
Bryce
Hawk. Right? Okay. And Bryce is going to be talking about the challenge of homelessness. and why it's very important that we try to solve that challenge so that, like all the different crops in the field, everybody has a chance to flourish. And then after Bryce, do we go to Blas Estrada, who is talking about the challenge of organizing businesses in a way that will allow them to grow new ideas as opposed to be sort of stifled by their old style organizational structures. And he also does a lot of work in education, I've come to learn. He runs a nonprofit that, he used to work for OtterBox, I think, and now runs a nonprofit that basically when kids buy a backpack, provides a backpack for a low-income